No, stop. Don't play the intro. It's not worth it. Hi, and welcome to Hats Off. I'm your host, an extremely disappointed stepdad, D'Angelo Edwards. Except, can I even call this episode Hats Off? I usually make it a point to cover stuff I like, that I think people should check out, you know? I try and bring a little positivity into the world. But what's the point when no matter what I do, stuff that I love will get dragged through the mud by giant megacorporations? I watched a friend die today, and that friend was Artemis Fowl. Or at least some gross, twisted version of it. Along with Percy Jackson, Artemis Fowl was one of my favorite book series growing up. And much like Percy Jackson, when the time came to give it a movie adaptation, instead of getting the Harry Potter treatment it deserves, I had to sit in a chair as Disney spread its cheeks and crapped this out into my eyes. This movie can't even compare to the Percy Jackson movies. Those at least bear some resemblance to the book they're based off of, but I don't even know what to say about this movie. It's not even an adaptation. How do you get everything wrong? Like everything. Every character, every plot point, even the basic appeal of the books is lost on this piece of digital garbage. I'm mad. I'm mad! When I saw the trailer for this movie, I didn't expect much. I just wanted a straight-to-DVD quality movie. I wanted a 7 out of 10, and instead I got a -7.
I expect nothing, and I'm still let down.
So buckle up, buckaroos, because this isn't going to be a normal episode of Hats Off. Today, I'm going to be yelling about how exactly Artemis manages to fail in every way, and is possibly the worst book adaptation ever. Now before I get started on the movie, let me tell you guys about the books, and why they work so well. Artemis Fowl is the story of Artemis Fowl, a young genius and criminal mastermind, from a long line of criminal masterminds. Keep that in mind.
That's a surprise tool that can help us later.
In the first book, he discovers the existence of fairies and kidnaps one, in order to secure a ransom of gold from the fairy world. But that makes it sound like he's the villain. Oh, does it, intern? Does it? You know, it's funny you would say that, because it's the entire freaking point of the book. Artemis Fowl is the bad guy. The entire plot of the book is that he is the villain of the story. But he's likable, charming even. You kind of want him to win, in the same way you root for someone like the Joker. That's the appeal, and one of the major themes of the book. You aren't following the good guy. You're following the guy who's in it for himself. Sure, as the books go on, Artemis eventually progresses from villain to anti-villain to anti-hero, and eventually hero. But that is done over the course of 7 books, and a long time getting to know the character. But the hook is that you are reading a book about a child villain. The magic and stuff is cool and all, but that's just icing on the cake really. But this movie trades in that genius bit of subversion for the most basic cookie-cutter young adult protagonist, played by the coldest, stiffest child actor I've seen since Are You Afraid of the Dark? But how bad does this movie fail? Oh boy, I hope you guys have some free time. Let's pop this turd. The movie begins with a swarm of reporters trying to get into the Fowl mansion, after dragging out a man that is said to be an accomplice of Fowl. It has come to the attention of the media that Artemis Fowl Sr. is a criminal, and they want to question his son, Artemis Fowl Jr., which is my first nitpick. He's always called Artemis Fowl II in the books, and I know it's small, but the second sounds way cooler than Jr. This is a small gripe, but trust me, you'll be begging for errors like this later. The man is brought in for questioning, and he settles in as a narrator, after which we get our first introduction to Artemis Fowl Jr. And from the first glimpse at our protagonist, my heart sank, and I knew that what I was about to watch would be gutter trash. Have you ever seen a character ruined in one scene? One simple scene told me everything I needed to know about this movie. We open on Artemis Fowl, surfing. The intellectual, highly uncoordinated, never goes outside Artemis Fowl is first shown doing an extreme sport. They had no intention of adapting the books. They just wanted to borrow the name. The wave of exhaustion that crept into my body when I saw this scene is undescribable.
My disappointment is immeasurable, and my day is ruined.
And this is the first scene. As we get to know Artemis, we learn that he is a genius, racking up achievements and not fitting in at school. Another change from the book. Artemis doesn't go to school. I have no idea why they changed that, as it has no bearing to the plot. In fact, the only reason I think they do it is so that they can show him visiting the school counselor, where we learn that he has a huge ego and that his mother is dead, which is another big problem. In the books, his mother is alive and his father is missing. This drives his mother insane and helps to give a little humanity to Artemis, showing that he can care for others. And it is shown that curing his mother is the main reason he wanted to capture a fairy. But in the movie, his mother is killed off to bring a little quick sympathy. And it doesn't work, because the movie never brings her up again. The dad doesn't talk about her. Artemis barely mentions her. She's killed for a quick little throwaway line. After watching Artemis do some more extreme sports on one of those stupid one-wheeled skateboard things, we get a taste of his relationship with his dad, a dealer of art and antiques. Colin Farrell doesn't do a bad job here, but he comes off as super generic. Nothing interesting about him. Just your everyday dad that wants to protect Artemis from his line of work. Been there, done that. He bonds with Artemis, telling him stories about fairies and other myths. So I'm gonna spoil some stuff because honestly this movie deserves it. In the movie, instead of being a criminal mastermind and also not being missing, Artemis Sr. is like a quasi-protector of fairy secrets, I guess? Why is he that? I don't know. They never really explain it. It's just another way they babify the plot. Because we can't follow a villain. Kids won't like that. Because villains are so lame. Darth Vader, screw him. Scarface? Oh my god, I can't keep my freaking eyes open. Snorefest. If it is not a basic heroic archetype, I don't want it. Thank you, Disney. Thank you for sucking all the creativity out of this story. It was so hard to choke down with all that flavor. Shove more of this tasteless goop down my throat. Thank you, Daddy Disney, thank you. Sorry, I got off track there. Anyway, Artemis's dad goes off on another secret trip and gets captured, with the villain of this movie calling Artemis and telling him. This is where we meet one of the most important characters in the book, Butler.
Oh, and under no circumstances were you to ever call him the Butler, even though his last name was in fact Butler.
Oh, I'm sorry, he doesn't like to be called that in this movie. Here he is Domovoy, or more commonly called Dom. In the books, he is known as Butler because he comes from a high-trained, secret family organization of bodyguards. He's a mountain of a man, intimidating, cool, looks like he could snap you in two just by glancing at you. And here, we instead have this melting pudding pop of a man. He's so unintimidating, it's almost laughable. He doesn't look like a bodyguard, he looks like the valet. They completely ruined Butler in this movie. And why are they calling him by his first name? In the books, his name is a highly guarded secret. Artemis only learns it on his deathbed, but here they flaunt it. And why? I guess it would look bad to call the black guy Butler. But if that's the case, why did they change him? I've already spoken about how I don't like race changes for established characters. I get it in things like Harry Potter, where they never really outright said what race the characters are. But in Artemis Fowl, they describe him all the time. And in the graphic novels, and on the covers. He doesn't look like that. Bad Disney. I'm gonna have an aneurysm and we're not even 15 minutes in. Butler, and yes, that's what I'm gonna call him, tells Artemis about his father's doings, and they learn that his father's kidnapper wants a magical weapon. So they decide to capture a fairy to get it. This is where we get our first look at Haven, the world of the fairies. And boy is it boring. No colors, no magic, just a bunch of rocks. You would think that with Disney at the helm, they would have a better sense of whimsy. But why break the disappointment streak? You're 4 for 4, Disney! We meet Holly Short, an officer of LEP Recon, or Leprechaun, which came off as clever in the books, but here that pun is just painful. And we also get a better look at our narrator, Mulch Diggums, played by Josh Gad. Sadly, Mulch is the best part of the movie, and he's still not that good. He just kinda looks like a discount Hagrid, and for some reason they gave him a complex about his size? Again, just for some easy sympathy, but they don't really bring it up that much. Holly goes to the surface to capture a renegade troll, but on her way back, she stops by Fowl Manor, because it was the last place her father was seen. I would say more about the troll fight, but it was just a standard CGI monster fight. It didn't look impressive, and the troll's design was extremely generic. Also, the Lep Recon uniforms are awful. They look like a bunch of mini green goblins.
Here's the real truth.
Once she gets back to the mansion, she is captured by Artemis and Butler. The rest of the Leprechaun launches a plan to save her, with one of them secretly working for the person who kidnapped Artemis Sr. This person is Opal Cowboy, a super interesting super genius and megalomaniac in the book, here reduced to a few lines in a computer voice. And they had no reason to put her here. This movie pretty much covers the first book, with so few elements taken from the second book that it comes off as frivolous. In fact, the only reason she's here is because they removed Artemis from the seat of villain, where he belongs. And speaking of Artemis, I'm sorry, but the kid playing him is awful. No emotion in his face, and whenever he talks, he sounds like a robot.
I beg your pardon?
It's a kind of temporal vacuum that they create so they can operate unseen by the human eye.
Like, smile, dude, make a joke. In the books, Artemis had wit, he was charming, he was funny, he got frustrated, he was a person. This kid is stiffer than a plank of wood with half the talent of one. Not to mention that after capturing Holly, that's when the movie tries to give him some of his villainous charm. But it's such a character whiplash. Like, why is he suddenly having fun being the bad guy, when just a few minutes ago all he wanted was his dad back? And he's not the only character that experiences this. All the characters do. Holly goes from captive to suddenly relating to Artemis about his missing dad. And later on in the movie, he calls her his best friend, when the only interaction they've had is Artemis kidnapping her, and them fighting a troll that was sent to fight Artemis because he kidnapped her. How does that make them friends? He's done nothing good for her. They didn't go through anything, they barely even talked. But back to the movie, once Lep Recon sieges the castle, we get a fight scene with Butler and Artemis. Yes, Artemis. He fights.
Fuck you, movie! Fuck you!
After defeating the fairies, Artemis strikes a deal with the commander, Holly, for the weapon that Opal wants. They don't have it, so they send in Mulch to dig into the house and save Holly. This is where we get not only the most book-accurate scene, but also the most disturbing.
Stand back.
It's feeding time.
I can't express the visceral fear that passed through my body when I saw this. This weird Josh Gad body horror. Of all the things they changed, of all the things they babyfied, why did they leave this in? I don't get it. But I don't want to look at it anymore, so I'm moving on. Mulch breaks in and cracks a safe, which reveals that the weapon was there the entire time. And Artemis knew that, because he had planned for it. He knew he had the weapon, but he needed someone to crack the safe. The twist isn't interesting, it's not clever, and frankly, I'm too low on energy to yell about it. But the traitor in LEP Recon wants the weapon, so he sends in the troll to kill everyone there. And during the fight, Butler is mortally wounded. This doesn't happen the same way in the books, nor does it even happen in the same book. In the first book, he fights off the troll, and goes on to be known as the only human to do so. But later in the books, he's shot in a double cross. This leads to one of the most touching scenes in the book, with Artemis learning his name for the first time, and having to deal with the loss of his best friend. In the movie, however, Artemis watches Stoneface as what's supposed to be his longtime companion breathes his last, but really it just looks like he's taking a nap. Later on, Holly's magic is restored and she heals Butler, who once again she suddenly cares about, and the previous death scene amounts to nothing. Much like the whole movie. Artemis wants to use the weapon to bring his father back, but being a human he can't or he'll die, so Holly agrees to do it in exchange for the weapon. But first, the time field around the mansion dissipates, causing chaos. Oh, did I forget to mention the time field? Well, it doesn't really affect much. Just a way to justify all this happening without anyone noticing. It's not important. Anyway, Holly uses the weapon to bring back Artemis's dad. Mulch is arrested by human police, and Opal goes down as history's least interesting villain. Artemis and Holly are now forever friends, and Holly is promoted for her actions. But that's not the end. It turns out that Artemis is tracking Opal, and is now joining his father in his job. He set up Mulch's capture as the government wouldn't intervene, and goes to pick him up in his jail cell, as he flies off in a helicopter, with Holly flying by his side, as they race towards a sequel that is definitely not going to happen. So that was Artemis Fowl. Oh my god, where do I start? Butchered characters, boring set pieces, basic story, bad CGI, useless changes made to characters, awful action scenes, and ultimately just boring.
I could forgive all of that, all of it, if you weren't such a bore.
They didn't even read the books. I'd slap them if they told me they did. Because if they read the books, they didn't retain anything. I haven't read them in a decade and I remember more. The basic premise of Artemis Fowl is that he is a child villain, a criminal mastermind. But Disney thought that wouldn't do well. And if that's their reasoning, then they are idiots. Incredible idiots. Villains sell so well. They have a lucrative franchise just based on the villains. How do you mess this up? How? And why to me? I can't have anything.
Come on, man, I can't have shit in this house!
Percy Jackson was ruined too, but those movies are the Godfather compared to this one. They better be glad it went straight to streaming because it would have been destroyed at the theaters. I can't believe that they thought this was okay. I'm so mad. I'm furious. I haven't felt this way about a movie in a long time, and you guys needed to hear it. So stay away from this movie. Don't pirate it. Don't stream it. Don't even Google it. Just buy the books. Now, if you excuse me, I have to attend the funeral. Because they just killed another f***ing franchise.